Meet the Duane twins, Allison and Anne. The women were born in Utica, New York. In 1978, they also had an older sister named Amy who was 3 years their senior. When the twin girls were 5 years old, their mother Miriam passed away, leaving them to grow up without maternal love and care. The girls were twins, almost identical in facial features and personalities, but there were differences between them. Allison had a more dominant personality and was a leader, while Anne, unlike her sister, was more reserved, balanced, sweet and kind. Like all twins, the girls did everything together, were inseparable, and sometimes it seemed abnormal how well they could sense each other, as if they had telepathy between them. They could understand what the other needed at any moment, or what the other was about to say before she said it. They were very close and loved each other dearly, but at the same time, there was a kind of toxic, perverse relationship between them, bordering on hatred. Those who knew the twins were amazed at how they could sense each other. If one started to speak, the other could finish her sister's sentences, but throughout their lives, the sisters would fight each other like crazy. Their lives were full of ups and downs, quarrels and terrible fights, then moments of love, and then it would all repeat. Of course, the absence of their mother left an imprint on them, but time passed, the sisters grew up, and in their teens, the girls became interested in yoga, which should have had a beneficial effect on the twins, calming them down and stopping their fights. Indeed, externally, everything seemed quite peaceful. The twins' fascination with yoga led them to the idea of starting their career by opening a joint yoga studio. They found a suitable place around Palm Beach, Florida, invested money, and in 2008 they opened a studio for those who wanted to practice yoga, called Double Power Yoga. This studio, opened in 2008, existed for a fairly long period until 2014. The studio immediately became popular. Within 2 months, the yoga school had gained fame in the city, attracting a large number of people who wanted to practice, and the sisters became recognizable personalities, making acquaintances with influential people. The twins' business brought in a good income, and over time the sisters bought identical Porsche cars, which they drove around the city. The girls started living in an elite high-rise building in Palm Beach, dressing in fashionable salons, and continued to spread the idea of practicing yoga, telling everyone how much yoga can help in life. The sisters said that their yoga studio in Palm Beach was the heartbeat of the entire area. The yoga school was thriving, but behind the scenes, where outsiders couldn't see, the relationship between the sisters remained the same as in childhood. They quarreled and fought like teenage girls. As the twins' yoga studio was gaining popularity, they were approached with an offer to star in a reality show that would be about the studio run by twins, as well as about all the dramas in their lives. But for some reason, the release of this project stalled, but the producers, convincing the sisters that the show would definitely be released and that it would be necessary to show the sisters' success, persuaded the girls to rent a more beautiful and spacious premises for yoga classes, and the sisters followed this advice. Despite the fact that the show never materialized, the twins moved to a studio that was more pleasant for them, but the maintenance costs increased and they could no longer fully cover them. Getting a good fee for participating in the show didn't work out for the sisters, and the bills were huge. They gradually began to get into debt, which further aggravated the situation, and in 2014 it was decided to close the studio. Now I'll tell you an extraordinarily interesting detail, but only to those incredible and wonderful people who subscribe to this channel right now. Like this video and write any comment so that as many people as possible can see this video. The sisters closed the studio in a very peculiar way. They just left. The sisters just abandoned the classes, didn't show up at the studio, didn't pay the employees, didn't return people's money for their participation. And this angered society and turned it against the sisters, because those who came to practice at the studio felt simply robbed. Therefore, the twin sisters left the city and moved to Utah Park City, Utah, and also changed their names as they planned to write a book in the future, and their names were too well known and frequently appeared on the internet. Because of the failure with the yoga studio, the sisters wanted to start from scratch. Allison changed her name to Alexandria, and Anne became Anastasia. Having settled in a new place, the girls opened another yoga studio, but they no longer had the same success as the first time. Their studio failed, and as a result, the twins found themselves in debt for $150,000 and became bankrupt. At the same time, the relocation, debts, and bankruptcy were accompanied by stress and worries, and the twins began to quarrel more than usual. And to relieve stress, they began to resort to alcohol more often. According to eyewitnesses, while the girls lived in Utah Park City, neighbors repeatedly called the police on them because the sisters drank a lot, loudly argued and fought. Apparently, the twins were going through very difficult times during this period, were depressed, experiencing depression, and they didn't like living in Utah, so in the end, they packed all their things and went to the most beautiful place on earth, Hawaii. This was in 2015, and interestingly, when the twins said they were going to Hawaii, they added that they were going on a real pilgrimage, ride through holy places, and want to search for the meaning of life. But as soon as the sisters reached their destination, they again faced problems and got into trouble. One time, or rather on Christmas Eve, Alexandria and Anastasia decided to celebrate Christmas in a fun way. As usual, they didn't know when to stop with alcohol. The feast took place in a restaurant where the girls got pretty drunk and, of course, quarreled. Having decided to go home, they, however, did not stop arguing and already near the car began to swear so fiercely that they lost control and drove into a ditch. This happened very close to the restaurant, and the consequences could have been very serious. Fortunately, when the police arrived at the scene, the sisters had already gotten out of the car safe and sound. However, instead of calming down, they continued to swear and even began to insult the restaurant owner. Not understanding what was happening and why they were so angry with him, the sisters, in their drunken frenzy, even threatened him with violence, saying, "We will send the mafia to you, let them deal with you." Of course, such behavior did not go unnoticed. The police detained the belligerent sisters for hooliganism. As a result, a fine, and it seems a certain sobering up, because after this incident they seemed to calm down a little. Further events showed that pleasant changes also took place in the life of the twins. In 2016, they both found boyfriends and started dating guys. For Alexandria, it was Lonnie Dickerson, and Anastasia started a relationship with Federico Bailey. It would seem that personal life was getting better and the sisters finally found their happiness. But not everything was so cloudless. Once Federico and Anastasia decided to go on a hike, Alexandria was supposed to stay at home. While preparing for the trip and stocking up on groceries at the supermarket, Anastasia accidentally took her sister's credit card instead of her own. Deciding not to use someone else's card, she went back home to get her own. But suddenly Alexandria, for some reason, changed her mind and decided that she also wanted to join the hike. It is worth noting that Federico, unlike the sisters, perfectly understood the problems associated with alcohol and tried to protect the girls from unnecessary temptation. Therefore, during this trip, he strictly forbade taking any alcoholic beverages with them. But Alexandria, as always, did her own thing. She secretly took a bottle of wine with her and hid it well in the car. When Federico discovered the forbidden alcohol, he was very upset and disappointed. This find caused considerable tension between the participants of the hike. Anastasia, in turn, got angry with her sister for such an irresponsible act. As we can see, even on vacation, in the company of their loved ones, the sisters could not get rid of their old habits and again found themselves in the epicenter of conflict. It would seem that a bottle of wine is a trifle, but it is from such trifles that serious problems often begin. And something tells me that this incident was just the tip of the iceberg. What other surprises did the Duane sisters have in store for their companions during this trip? Friends, a very important point: creating such content requires a lot of time, and right now my channel and I are going through a difficult financial situation. I would be infinitely grateful if you would become a sponsor of this channel and support me with your donation, and in return I will be able to personally respond to you in the comments and also mention your noble name in my video. So become sponsors, I will be eternally grateful. I will note that after that tense scene with the wine, the company, which consisted of sisters Alexandria and Anastasia, as well as Anastasia's boyfriend Federico, finally reached their destination. The campsite where they stopped was located in a surprisingly picturesque area, surrounded by wonderful views of wildlife. While the girls were unpacking their things, Federico decided to freshen up after the long road and went to the nearest spring. However, when he returned to the camp, he was surprised to find that neither the sisters nor their car were anywhere to be seen. It's hard to even imagine what he felt at that moment: confusion, anxiety, perhaps even fear for his companions. As it later turned out, while Federico was away, Alexandria and Anastasia for some reason decided to get in the car and drive down the road that led to Hana. This highway, by the way, is considered one of the most beautiful in the world, but at the same time one of the most dangerous. It winds between the rocks, sometimes resembling a serpentine more than a road. On one side is a solid stone wall, on the other is an abyss that takes your breath away just by looking at it. In addition, the sharp turns on this road often do not allow you to see if someone is approaching from the opposite direction. And if we add to this the fact that the route is not always well maintained and there are potholes, it becomes clear that traveling on it is a real challenge for the driver. But it seems that the Duane sisters were little concerned about all these dangers. They boldly, if not carelessly, raced along the winding road, paying no attention to either the beauty around them or the risks that lurked at every turn. And all this because they were preoccupied with another argument. It's hard to even imagine what they could argue about at such a crucial moment, because it's obvious that on this road you need to be as attentive and careful as possible. But despite everything, the sisters managed to notice a lonely woman on the side of the road who obviously needed help. Without much thought, they decided to give her a ride. On the way, they asked the hitchhiker where she was heading, and then dropped her off where she asked. It would seem that this good deed should have slightly diffused the atmosphere between the sisters. But as it turned out, it was quite the opposite. As soon as the unfortunate passenger left the car, a simply terrible quarrel broke out between Alexandria and Anastasia, and it happened in the most dangerous place on one of the sharp turns. Later, one of the eyewitnesses of these events told me that he saw with his own eyes how in the car that was passing by, two girls were furiously waving their arms, punching each other with their fists and pulling each other's hair. The guy was dumbfounded by such a sight because he realized that these actions distracted the driver from driving the car, and on a road like the route to Hana at any moment. But despite the danger of the situation, the eyewitness realized that he could not help in any way. Everything happened so quickly that he wouldn't even have time to react. All he had left was to watch helplessly as the girl at the wheel suddenly accelerated sharply, turned the steering wheel to the left, and the car, breaking off the cliff, flew into the abyss. According to experts, the car fell from a height of about 60 meters and landed right on a pile of sharp stones. The most amazing thing is that it was the only area around the cliff where there was no water. It seems as if some unknown force specifically directed the car to this particular spot. From the strong impact, the car overturned and fell on its roof, so that its license plates were facing the sky. And you know, in this tragic situation, there is one moment that can be called a real miracle. It turns out that the girls were not driving some small car, but a Ford Explorer, a fairly large vehicle. Experts say that if they had been in a smaller car, they would have had practically no chance of surviving. News of the accident spread like wildfire through the surrounding area. The route leading to Hana is quite popular, so people began to gather around the scene of the incident. Everyone looked down in horror at the mangled car lying among the rocks. Someone even called the rescue service by dialing 911. And here the second amazing moment in this story happened. The people who had gathered on the cliff suddenly noticed that someone was moving in the car. It was an almost unbelievable piece of news. It turns out that after such a terrible fall, someone still survived. The police, who arrived at the scene of the accident, immediately began to question numerous witnesses, trying to find out what had happened. And one detail immediately caught their attention. It turns out that on the road surface there were clearly visible traces of tires from the Duane sisters' car. But the strangest thing is that these traces had no signs of braking before the car flew off the cliff. On the contrary, everything indicated that the driver deliberately accelerated and directed the car straight to the edge of the cliff. You must agree that such things do not happen by chance. Meanwhile, rescuers were delivered by helicopter to the scene of the tragedy to check if anyone was left alive in the twisted car. What they saw in the car interior shocked even experienced experts. One of the sisters, Anastasia, was dead. Her body had numerous fractures, and one of the paramedics even compared it to a bag filled with bone fragments. But the real miracle was that the second sister, Alexandria, survived. True, she also had a lot of serious injuries, several broken ribs and a damaged arm. But despite everything, when the girl was pulled out of the wrecked car, she was able to stand on her own feet. And here we come to the most mysterious moment of this story. When the rescuers freed Alexandria from the car, they noticed that she had a lock of blonde hair clenched in her hand, the same color as her dead sister's hair. Most likely, this hair was torn out during the fight that the random eyewitness saw shortly before the accident. But what shocked the investigators the most was Alexandria's behavior. She did not look either frightened or upset about what had just happened. It seemed that the girl was not at all bothered by the fact that she had just miraculously escaped after the car fell from the cliff. And most oddly, she never once asked about her sister's condition, did not ask if Anastasia had survived. Alexandria did not cry, did not sob, did not show her emotions at all. You must agree that such a reaction is on the verge of normal, and it was this that made the investigators wonder. Does this terrible accident hide some terrible secret? Perhaps what happened on the road to Hana was not an accident. After that fatal accident, Alexandria was immediately taken to the hospital, and it was there that she was found by the police, who arrived to conduct an interrogation. From the very beginning, it was clear that the girl was not too willing to cooperate with the investigation. She reluctantly answered questions, and her whole demeanor indicated irritation and dissatisfaction with the presence of the officers. Just imagine the first thing she said to them was, "Why are you here?" You know, during my many years as a detective, I've interrogated a lot of witnesses and suspects, and usually people who have just experienced such a terrible tragedy behave differently. They may be shocked, scared, upset, but indifference is the last thing you expect in such a situation. And another detail that surprised me a lot during the entire conversation with the police officers, Alexandria never once asked about her sister's condition. No worries, no anxiety, absolutely nothing. In the end, the investigators had to inform the girl about Anastasia's death themselves. And you know what struck me the most? The complete absence of any reaction from Alexandria. She listened to this terrible news with a completely empty, indifferent look, without a hint of emotion. You must agree that this is more like the behavior of a person who has long come to terms with the loss, and not one who has just lost the closest person in an instant. But Alexandria's strange reaction is not the biggest surprise in this story. When the twins' father found out about the tragedy, his first words were, "It's a pity that the wrong sister died." That's right, you didn't mishear. The man actually regretted that Anastasia died in the accident, and not Alexandria. Such an attitude towards one's own children is, to put it mildly, alarming. Meanwhile, the police continued the investigation and quickly found out that the sisters were fighting right in the car before the accident. This information made the investigators wonder, was the car's fall from the cliff actually Alexandria's deliberate act? Maybe she purposely directed the car towards the abyss to get rid of her sister. Even more suspicions were aroused by the results of the tests, which showed that the level of alcohol in Alexandria's blood was 3 times higher than the permissible norm. That is, the girl was actually heavily drunk behind the wheel and had no right to drive at all, let alone go on such a dangerous trip. The situation was complicated by the fact that at the time of the accident, the girls had no documents with them. It was because of this that the police had to rely on Alexandria's words to establish the identity of the deceased. And the girl, meanwhile, was forced to go home to find her ID and prove that she was indeed herself. The investigators also turned to Lonnie Dickerson, Alexandria's boyfriend, with a request to confirm her identity. When Lonnie was told about the accident and Anastasia's death, his reaction was no less strange than Alexandria's. It seemed that this news did not touch him at all. He just looked at the police officers with an empty, indifferent look. But Federico, Anastasia's boyfriend, was completely unaware of the tragedy. He was still waiting for the girls at the campsite, not understanding where they could have gone. Only the next morning, having got to his friend's place in Hana by hitchhiking, Federico learned the terrible truth. The news of his beloved's death was a real shock for him. The guy was extremely upset and confused, but suddenly remembered something. And believe me, this information greatly interested the investigation. Undoubtedly, the information provided by Federico was a real sensation for the investigation. He said that a week before the tragedy, Alexandria openly stated her intention to kill Anastasia. Moreover, at one point she even said, "I got rid of her," as if the murder had already happened. Such words could not but cause serious concern. True, Federico could not say for sure the reason why Alexandria wished death to her sister, but he suggested that there was a very strong rivalry and mutual jealousy between the girls because of each other's successes. It was hard for the twins to come to terms with the fact that they were so similar in appearance, and this forced them to constantly compete and oppose each other. Federico said that the sisters were constantly trying to outdo each other to prove their uniqueness. It was as if they wanted to tell the world, "Look, we may look like 2 peas in a pod, but we are different personalities." But despite this, the girls could not stay away from each other for long. Their relationship was a strange combination of love and hate, tenderness and aggression. When they were together, they constantly quarreled and insulted each other, but as soon as they were apart, they already missed their other half. But the strangest thing is that Federico recalled that once, after another heated argument, Alexandria told him, as if in passing, "My sister and I will leave this planet on the 30th. When the guy heard this, he thought that maybe the girls had decided to commit suicide together. But life went on as usual, and gradually this phrase was erased from Federico's memory. Upon hearing such a confession, the investigators became seriously alarmed. A terrible picture began to emerge in their heads. Alexandria deliberately drove the car into the abyss to kill her sister. Of course, one could assume otherwise, for example, that the girls decided to settle scores with life together, or that it was just a tragic coincidence, an accident. But something told the detectives that the answer lay precisely in Alexandria's words, which Federico heard. So the investigators decided to take a closer look at the Duane sisters' car. Fortunately, it was a new, modern car with many technical gadgets, and most importantly, it had a black box like in airplanes. This device records all information about the movement of the car, speed, maneuvers, change of direction, and so on. Thanks to the data from the black box, it was possible to find out an extremely important detail. At the moment the car fell, the brakes were not used. That is, the car was flying off the cliff at full speed. No one even tried to stop or at least slow down. For the investigators, this was direct evidence that the accident was not an accident. Suspicions were intensified by the fact that the car fell into the abyss exactly where there were only sharp stones at the bottom and not water. It seemed as if someone had specifically chosen this spot for the fall. Moreover, it was here on this stretch of road that for some reason there was no protective fence. Everything seemed to come together for the implementation of someone's sinister plan. Experts made another interesting conclusion. Alexandria survived thanks to the deployment of airbags. But Anastasia was not so lucky. She jumped and bumped a lot in the cabin during the fall. Someone even suggested that if at the time of the accident the girl was pulling her sister by the hair, then Alexandria could quite possibly involuntarily turn the steering wheel and press the gas. Having received such testimony and evidence, the investigators decided to bring an official charge against Alexandria. There was only one question left: what motive pushed the girl to such a terrible act? It turns out that shortly before the tragedy, Federico and Anastasia were planning to open their own business on another Hawaiian island. And here we come to a possible motive for the crime. According to the testimony, Alexandria was extremely dissatisfied with the fact that her sister was going to leave her. The girl was so strongly opposed to parting with her twin that she may have decided to resort to the most radical measures. Having gathered all the circumstantial evidence, the investigation was finally able to bring an official charge against Alexandria, the intentional murder of her sister, that is, a second-degree crime. But when the police arrived to arrest the suspect, it turned out that she had already fled the house. It seems that the girl somehow guessed about the possible arrest and decided to hide from justice. But Alexandria apparently forgot about one simple thing: Maui is an island, and you can only leave it in two ways, by sea or by air. So it wasn't too difficult for the police to find out that the girl had booked a plane ticket and that her flight was about to depart. And you know, sometimes fate can be surprisingly ironic. By some coincidence, it was on this plane that a mechanical malfunction occurred and the departure had to be postponed. So instead of being hundreds of kilometers away from the crime scene, Alexandria was forced to stay very close by. She went to wait it out in a nearby hotel. And there she was eventually found and arrested by the police. During the preliminary hearing of the case, Alexandria did not plead guilty to the murder of her sister. And here I would like to draw your attention to one detail. In the footage from the courtroom, you can see that the suspect's hand was not bandaged, although she had previously complained about an injury. Some of those present even suggested that Alexandria could have exaggerated the severity of her injury in order to arouse sympathy from others. The day of the substantive trial came. A large jury gathered on Maui, and Alexandria was officially charged with killing her sister. For this, the girl was taken to Hawaii to personally face justice. The process began on January 29, 2018. At first, Alexandria looked very excited and scared. No wonder, after all, she was facing life imprisonment. One of the key witnesses in this case was the same random passer-by who saw with his own eyes how the sisters were fiercely fighting in the car shortly before the accident. The man described in detail what he saw: how Anastasia pulled her sister by the hair, pulled her head to herself and punched her with her fists. This testimony formed the basis of the defense's version, according to which Alexandria, being behind the wheel, could have lost control of the car from pain and shock. Allegedly, not seeing the road clearly due to her sister's attack, the girl could have unintentionally directed the car into the abyss. Then Federico, the deceased Anastasia's boyfriend, was questioned on the witness stand. He spoke about Alexandria's strange and disturbing behavior after the tragedy. According to him, the girl tried to establish closer contact with him, suggested taking a shower together, began to wear her sister's things. Federico admitted that he was shocked and repelled by such actions. Despite the outward resemblance to his beloved, he categorically refused to get close to Alexandria. But despite all this testimony, the suspect's lawyers insisted that it was Anastasia who caused the fatal accident. Allegedly, by attacking her sister, she provoked her to rash actions. The defense also referred to the results of the examination, according to which the car's wheel was changed shortly before the accident so one of the tires was completely smooth. Given that the road was wet that day, and the sister's car was initially swaying due to the fight inside the cabin, it could well have happened that Alexandria simply could not cope with driving on the slippery road. So the court faced a difficult question. What really happened that fatal day on the road to Hana? Was the accident really an accident caused by a combination of factors, or was there a malicious intent behind it? And most importantly, is Alexandria guilty of her sister's death? The answer to these questions was to be given by the jury. So after hearing all the available evidence, the judge reached a conclusion and announced his decision. According to it, Alexandria was not responsible for the accident and the death of her sister, and therefore she was immediately acquitted. In the judge's opinion, the accused lost control of the vehicle, and perhaps she did indeed turn on the left turn signal. But even if she did, the evidence shows that the car was being heavily shaken from side to side due to the fight inside the cabin. The judge noted that the mere probability that Alexandria could have driven the car into the abyss is not sufficient for a guilty verdict. This requires strong and indisputable evidence of intent, and in this case they were absent. Instead, eyewitness accounts and expert findings rather indicated that the accident was the result of a fatal coincidence of circumstances: bad weather conditions, a slippery road, lack of fencing in a dangerous area, and most importantly, a merciless fight between the sisters that distracted the driver from driving. As a detective, this court decision seems rather controversial to me. Is it possible to exclude intent in a situation where one sister openly threatened to kill the other? Can it be considered an accident that the crash occurred in the very place where there were only sharp rocks below? After all, isn't it strange that Alexandria, despite the death of her twin, behaved as if nothing special had happened? These questions will probably never have unambiguous answers. Opinions on Alexandria's guilt were divided. Some consider her a completely innocent victim of a tragic coincidence. For others, she remains the main suspect who managed to escape punishment by cunning. Alexandria herself insists on her non-involvement in what happened. According to her, she misses Anastasia very much and is deeply saddened by everything that happened. But whether she can be believed is another question. And what do you think, dear viewers? What is your version of events? Do you agree with the court's decision, or perhaps you have your own opinion on this matter? Write in the comments. I will be very interested to hear your thoughts. This is where our story comes to an end. Thank you for watching until this moment. Know that you are the best. If you liked this video, like it and subscribe to the channel.